I want you to picture a hamster. Just right now, in your head.
You were probably picturing this tiny, fluffy pet, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Maybe it's running on a squeaky plastic wheel in a kid's bedroom or, stuffing a little sunflower seed into its face.
Well, I need you to take that image and completely shatter it. Just throw it out.
Right out the window. Because today we are taking a deep dive into the European hamster. And this is a wild, aggressive, guinea pig-sized beast that basically lives deep under our crop fields.
Oh, yeah. It hoards up to 50 kilograms of food in these massive underground pantries. And it is currently starring in one of the most intense, high-stakes conservation dramas in all of Europe.
Which is exactly our mission for this deep dive. We've got a huge stack of biological reports, conservation action plans, and some incredibly complex ecological modeling studies to go through.
Right, because we want to unpack the actual biology of the European hamster.
Yeah.
We need to figure out how modern agriculture turned what used to be like an all-you-can-eat buffet into a literal death trap for them.
And we'll also get into the extreme scientific measures being taken to pull them back from the brink of extinction, because it is intense.
It really is. And when you look at the bigger picture here, this isn't just a quirky story about trying to save a rodent.
No, not at all.
It is a really profound look at how our modern food systems clash with nature. It reveals the hidden costs of agricultural efficiency and just the massive coordinated effort it takes to undo that systemic damage.
Exactly. So to really grasp why this animal is in such deep trouble, I feel like we first have to understand what a little giant it actually is.
Oh, absolutely. It's a drastic pivot from the Syrian gold hamster that people buy at the pet store.
Yeah, the wild European hamster is the largest European representative of the vole family. We are talking about an animal that reaches up to 34 centimeters long and weighs up to 600 grams.
Which is just astounding when you look at their developmental trajectory. I mean, a European hamster pup weighs about 5 grams at birth.
5 grams, that's tiny.
Yeah, it's roughly the weight of a 20-cent coin. But by the time it is fully grown, it weighs 120 times its birth weight.
That is just a wild biological growth spurt.
Right. To put that in human terms, if we grew at that same proportional rate, an average adult human would weigh like over 400 kilograms.
Wow. Okay, so they get big fast. But the real superpower, the thing that makes a hamster, is the cheeks.
Oh, the cheek pouches are incredible.
Oh, they have these incredibly elastic cheek pouches. According to the research, they can carry up to 50 grams of food at a single time.
And, 50 grams might not sound like much on paper until you realize it accounts for 10% of their entire body weight.
Let's actually put that into perspective for a second. Imagine you weigh 75 kilograms. Carrying 10% of your body weight in your cheeks would be like carrying 7.5 kilograms of groceries in your mouth.
Just casually hauling groceries in your face.
Right. Just walking home from the store with a heavy sack of potatoes stuffed into your cheeks. It's ridiculous.
It is an incredible physiological adaptation, especially for an animal built around a hoarding lifestyle.
Yeah.
But there's another adaptation that I think is even more fascinating.
Oh, the coloring.
Yeah, the coloring and how it functions as a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
Because most mammals have a trait called countershading.
Where they have a darker back and a lighter belly, right?
Exactly. It is an evolutionary trick that helps them blend into shadows from above and below. But the European hamster has the exact opposite.
They are essentially wearing their colors backward. They have this yellow-brown back, but a pitch-black belly with these stark white paws and white patches on their face and sides.
And there's a brilliant behavioral reason for this reverse coloring.
Yeah.
Because when a European hamster is cornered by a predator, say, a fox or a bird of prey, it doesn't just cower or run away.
No, it gets aggressive.
It stands straight up on its hind legs. And when it does that, that pitch-black belly is fully exposed. By holding its little white paws up against that dark background, it creates this optical illusion.
A fake predator face right on its stomach? That is such an incredible evolutionary bluff.
It really is.
It's just standing there, flashing this monster face at an eagle, basically saying, I'm not a hamster, I'm a gremlin, back off.
And it relies heavily on that intimidation tactic because, well, it needs every advantage you can get to survive the winter. They are true hibernators.
Right. They sleep for 6 months, from October to March.
But it is not a continuous, unbroken sleep like some people imagine.
Wait, really? I always thought hibernation was just, sleeping straight through the cold. Why do they wake up?
It comes down to their metabolism and their physical size. Large mammals, like bears, can build up a massive, thick layer of fat to sustain them through months of dormancy.
Oh, but a hamster's too small for that.
Exactly. A 600-gram rodent has a very high surface area to volume ratio. They simply cannot store enough fat on their small bodies to keep their internal furnace running for 6 straight months.
Even when they drop their core body temperature.
Even then. So they have to wake up every 5 to 14 days.
And they don't wake up to go outside, right? They wake up to eat.
Precisely.
Yep.
They have to continually fuel the furnace. This is why those massive chi pouches are so vital.
Oh, that makes sense.
During the late summer and autumn, they spend all their time building enormous underground pantries deep inside their burrows. Usually they hoard around 2 to 5 kilograms of grain.
Which is already a lot.
But caches of up to 50 kilograms have been recorded.
50 kilos of grain for one hamster. It really is an underground hoarding machine. So here is where the narrative kind of shifts.
Right.
If we have a creature perfectly designed to hoard vast amounts of food, that has a fake monster face on its belly to scare off predators, and that breeds very rapidly, how does an animal like that end up on the critically endangered list?
Well, the answer is entirely tied to the landscape they evolved to thrive in. They are what biologists call a synanthropic species.
Meaning they adapted specifically to live alongside human environments.
Exactly. And in their case, agricultural fields. They thrive in deep, loamy soils where they can dig their complex burrows, which, by the way, often go down 2 meters deep.
Wow.
And for centuries, our traditional farming practices inadvertently created a total paradise for them.
Yeah, the sources mention that back in the 1960s and 70s, they weren't just common, they were actually considered a massive agricultural plague.
Oh, they were everywhere.
Millions of them were killed for bounties. They were even hunted heavily for their fur, with reports saying it took up to 100 pelts to make a single hamster fur coat.
They were completely ubiquitous across Europe. But then the rules of survival in those fields suddenly changed. The agricultural landscape underwent a massive, rapid transformation.
We moved toward highly mechanized, hyper-efficient, intensive farming.
We did.
But hold on, this is completely counterintuitive to everything I know about rodents. If you put 2 mice in a room with just a little bit of food, you still end up with 50 mice.
Right. They breed constantly.
If you hunt a bunch of them, or if the food supply drops a bit, they are biologically programmed to just have more babies. So how does a shift in farming stop a breeding machine so quickly?
That is the core puzzle the researchers had to solve. And it ultimately comes down to the timing of the modern harvest and the specific crops we now choose to grow.
Okay, break that down for me.
Historically, European farmers grew a lot of summer cereals. Those crops were harvested late in the summer, usually around late August.
So they had a long season.
Exactly. That long growing season gave the female hamsters plenty of time to raise multiple litters of pups and hoard enough grain for the winter. But modern agriculture shifted heavily toward winter cereals.
Which are planted in the autumn and harvested much earlier.
Much, much earlier, often in June or July.
So the timeline just gets violently accelerated. Overnight, right in the middle of summer, the entire field is stripped bare.
Imagine the scenario from the hamster's perspective.
Yeah.
You are a female hamster nursing your second litter of the year. Suddenly, in a single afternoon, giant machinery rolls over the field. It removes your entire food source and your entire roof, all the tall stalks that provided protective cover.
Leaving you totally exposed.
You and your vulnerable pups are instantly exposed to every fox, buzzard, and feral cat in the area.
The cover is gone, the food is gone, and they still have months to go before winter even starts.
And that timing is what breaks the breeding cycle. Historically, females would easily have 3 litters a year. Now, because the environment becomes a barren wasteland by July, they barely manage to raise 2.
That's a huge drop.
When ecologists look at the demographic models, the reproductive rate has crashed so hard that effectively a female today only raises half a female to replace herself for the next year.
Wow, so the population isn't just gradually declining, it is mathematically collapsing.
Precisely. And it isn't just the timing of the harvest doing the damage. The modern machines themselves are much heavier, which compacts the soil.
Right, and then farmers typically do deep plowing immediately after the harvest to prepare the soil for the next crop cycle.
Which is devastating.
That deep plowing literally rips apart those complex 2-meter deep burrows we talked about.
And even if a hamster manages to survive the plow, and even if its burrow stays somewhat intact, that heavy soil compaction changes the moisture levels underground.
Because the soil can't breathe anymore.
Exactly. It can't breathe or drain properly. So the food that the hamsters did manage to store ends up molding and rotting before winter is over. They literally starve to death sitting inside their own pantries.
It is a brutal sequence of events, but the research points to something even darker.
It does.
There is a specific study in our sources about maize-corn monocultures. When farmers plant massive, unbroken fields of nothing but corn, the hamsters have no wild herbs or alternative grains to eat.
And a strict diet of corn leads to a severe vitamin B3 deficiency.
Right, and this was a groundbreaking and honestly devastating ecological finding.
Yeah, corn naturally binds vitamin B3, which is also known as niacin, making it biologically unavailable to the animal digesting it unless it's processed in a very specific way.
And niacin is absolutely essential for proper neurological function.
The researchers found that when female hamsters are forced to survive on this strict maize diet, the severe deficiency fundamentally alters their brain chemistry.
Oh, man.
It actually drives them to commit maternal infanticide. They eat their own young.
I mean, that is just horrific. A food system so perfectly optimized for human yield that it physically alters a wild animal's brain chemistry and drives it to eat its own babies.
It's a stark reality of monoculture farming.
If the wild fields are driving them to literal madness and starvation, we obviously can't leave them there. But you can't just scoop up a wild species and put it in a zoo forever. How do you actually rebuild a broken population?
Well, that is exactly where the intensive conservation efforts come in. Scientists recognized the fields were lethal, so they initiated extensive captive breeding programs across Europe.
Right, in France, in the Netherlands, and in Germany. The sources specifically mention the prominent program at Zoo Heidelberg.
Yeah, the immediate goal was to breed them safely, far away from the plows and the predators, and then release them back into the wild to bolster the failing populations.
But dropping a lab-raised hamster into a wild field doesn't just automatically work. The researchers quickly ran into what they called the naive hamster problem.
It is a massive hurdle in conservation biology. When you breed animals in captivity for generations, and in the French program's case, some lineages went up to 15 generations indoors, they lose their innate survival behaviors.
Forget how to be wild.
Basically. Yeah. They don't know how to forage efficiently, they don't know how to assess environmental risk, and most dangerously, they don't know how to recognize a predator.
There is this one study in the stack that perfectly illustrates this. Scientists took these lab-raised hamsters and confronted them with a moving predator model, a ferret. A wild hamster, using millions of years of instinct, would immediately freeze, hide, or flee for its burrow, but these captive-bred hamsters, they actually attacked the ferret.
Which is crazy. Taking an offensive strategy against a predator, like a ferret or a fox, is an incredibly maladaptive response.
It's suicide.
It is a guaranteed death sentence for a 500-gram rodent. They had completely lost the appropriate fear response because they had never needed it.
It's like taking someone who has lived their entire life in a padded room where food magically appears on a silver tray, dropping them into the middle of the Amazon rainforest, and expecting them to know how to hide from a jaguar.
That's a great analogy. They have no concept of consequence.
So to fix this, scientists developed a soft release solution, essentially a sensory boot camp for hamsters.
The researchers in the French Alsace region realized they needed a stepping stone between the safe, sterile laboratory cage and the lethal agricultural field. So they built a massive 2,000 square meter field enclosure.
And calling it an enclosure almost understates it. This thing is a fortress.
Oh, absolutely.
It has electric fences on the outside to keep out foxes and wild boars. It has wire mesh buried deep underground so the hamsters can't dig their way out, and smooth metal sheets on the walls so they can't climb over.
And the entire top of this massive footprint is covered in anti-bird nets to stop buzzards from swooping in.
Inside this fortress, they placed the captive-bred hamsters for 2 weeks. The goal was to expose them to natural stimuli without the lethal consequences.
For the first time in their lives, these hamsters experienced real weather, fluctuating temperatures, and natural compacted dirt that they actually had to work to dig through.
And they introduced non-lethal stress to wake up those instincts. They had camera traps set up inside, and they recorded shrews, field mice, and voles running around.
Plus, you have to imagine the hamsters could smell and hear the real foxes and ferrets pacing outside that electric fence.
Right. That sensory exposure is the critical mechanism of the boot camp. Smelling a predator or experiencing the physical strain of digging triggers those latent genetic behaviors.
It allows them to develop their cognitive capacities, build muscle, and adapt their immune and digestive systems to a wild environment.
And it worked, right?
It did. The study showed that after just 2 weeks in this enclosure, when the scientists tested them again, the hamsters had significantly modified their anti-predator behavior.
They stopped attacking.
Exactly. They started showing appropriate caution. They would freeze or hide.
So the boot camp actually worked. They learned how to be wild again. But here is the catch, and this leads us into the final piece of the puzzle.
The landscape.
Right. Even if we breed thousands of these street-smart, tough hamsters, putting them back into a stripped, early-harvest monoculture field is just feeding smarter hamsters to the foxes. You have to change the landscape itself.
Which requires deeply understanding the underlying mathematics of the ecosystem. The sources highlight a major study from Belgium that used a quantitative modeling framework called GMSE.
Wait, before we get to the math, what exactly is GMSE?
GMSE stands for Generalized Management Strategy Evaluation. It is basically a highly complex virtual sandbox. You input all the variables: the hamsters, the fox predation rates, the crop types, the weather, and the financial incentives paid to farmers.
So all the moving parts.
Right. Then you fast forward the simulation over 5-year periods to see who survives under different sets of rules.
So they ran thousands of these virtual sandboxes, and the models proved something really sobering. They showed that just helping the hamsters have more babies, even if you artificially bump up the number of litters they have, is not enough to stop the population decline.
Because if you just produce more babies in a landscape that is stripped bare of cover in July, the simulation shows those babies simply become an immediate larger buffet for predators.
That makes a lot of sense.
The math definitively showed that to reach a stable population goal, which in the Flemish conservation program was 500 individuals, you absolutely must see an increase in both reproductive success and adult survival rates simultaneously.
You need them to have the babies, and you need the adults to live long enough to dig those deep, complex burrows and hoard the massive winter food caches. And the only way the sandbox simulations achieved this was through a strategy called hamster-friendly farming.
Hamster-friendly farming is essentially a negotiated compromise between natural biodiversity and modern agriculture. It involves paying farmers financial compensation to modify their practices on specific plots of land.
What does that look like in practice?
This means leaving entire strips of wheat and alfalfa completely unharvested. It means delaying the harvest in other areas until much later in the summer, and it means absolutely no deep plowing, ensuring the burrows stay intact for the winter.
And they combine those farming changes with physical barriers. The study showed that when you combine electric fences to keep out the terrestrial predators with unharvested wheat that hides the hamsters from the birds of prey, the survival rates finally start to creep up to a mathematically sustainable level.
But, and this is key, the simulations also demonstrated just how fragile this balance is. Only the most optimistic scenarios, where a full 20% of the landscape was managed this way, and reproductive rates miraculously returned to pre-1985 levels, actually resulted in the population hitting that target of 500 individuals.
You might be wondering why you should care about a wheat field in Belgium or the exact harvest date in France. Why go through all this trouble building fortresses and running thousands of computer simulations just for a wild rodent?
Because the European hamster is what conservationists call a flagship species. It is a highly visible, measurable indicator of the health of an entire ecosystem.
It's the canary in the coal mine.
Exactly. When the hamsters are dying of starvation and vitamin deficiencies, it means the insects are dying, the field birds are dying, the vital wild herbs are gone. Saving the hamster isn't really just about the hamster. It is about returning biodiversity and sustainable practices to the very soil that grows the food we all eat.
It is about fixing the foundation that sustains us. Let's recap this incredible journey. We started with an underground hoarding machine that flashes a fake predator face on its belly to scare off eagles.
We saw how hyper-efficient farming turned their all-you-can-eat buffets into barren, lethal wastelands, even driving them to madness through strict monoculture diets.
We explored the massive scientific response to that collapse, breeding them in captivity, putting them through sensory boot camps to wake up their wild instincts, and running complex virtual sandboxes to prove that we have to fundamentally change our farming practices if we want them to survive.
It is a massive, continent-wide effort for a little giant.
And it leaves me with this final thought for you to mull over long after this deep dive ends. If our modern agricultural systems have become so ruthlessly efficient that they can literally starve out one of nature's greatest, most prolific hoarders, what other invisible ecological safety nets have we completely dismantled in our pursuit of a perfectly timed harvest? Think about that fluffy pet hamster on its wheel again. It is running endlessly, but it's completely disconnected from the natural world outside. Are our incredibly efficient food systems doing the exact same thing to us?